Hi there, welcome back to Cloud with Daria. In today's video, we are going to understand what Azure Backup is in the simplest way possible. Many people configure backups without actually understanding snapshots, recovery vault, backup consistency, and retention policies. And later, when backup fails, troubleshooting becomes difficult. Also, incorrect configuration can cost you more than it needs to be. So, in this video, I'll explain Azure Backups visually and beginner friendly. So first we'll start is what is Azure Backup. So Azure Backup is basically Microsoft's cloud backup service and its job is simple to protect your data so you can recover when something goes wrong. So for example, when your VM gets accidentally deleted, there is a ransomware attack, there is a corrupted Windows update or file deletion, right? All these scenarios can help you when there is a backup configured for your resources like virtual machines, file share, etc. And without backups, recovery becomes impossible. So Azure Backup protects you from any unforeseen events when you want to go back in time to restore your data to a specific point. And Azure Backup can protect virtual machines, your file share, your databases, or hybrid workloads. That is your on-prem machines. And our next thing is when we use the Azure Backup service in Azure, it needs another service, which is Recovery Services Vault. Recovery Services Vault is the service where all your data is going to get stored eventually. And you can think of Vault like a secure locker for your backups. And Azure stores recovery points, your backup history, policies inside the Vault. And this is important because many beginners think that backup stays inside the virtual machine or outside, but it's not the case. Backup data is managed separately inside the Vault, and we get a lot of features when you use Vault like immutability and a soft delete option. Even when you have deleted your backup from the Vault, it will stay there for 14 days and a lot of other security features. Now let's understand what actually happens when backup runs. So how Azure takes backup of your resources. Let's take an example of your virtual machine. So first of all, whenever we configure a backup for our virtual machine, Azure creates a snapshot. And a snapshot is basically a point in time picture of the disk of your virtual machine. And that screenshot captures exactly what existed at that particular moment. So whatever data is inside your virtual machine during a snapshot will get copied at that point of time exactly. And after snapshot creation, backup dates get transferred to the recovery services vault. So the snapshot gets taken off the disk present inside the virtual machine and then it gets transferred to the vault where your data is going to get stored. So whenever we are scheduling the backup for our resources, we have another layer, which level of data consistency we want for our resources. So we have three consistency types we can choose. So one we have is a application consistent, then we have is a file system and crash consistent. All have their own purpose. So crash consistent means backup captures disk exactly as it is. And this kind of backups happens when your virtual machine is stopped because doesn't check your file system or any application consistency. And the next file system consistent backup means file operationals are properly completed before backup. So any operations that are happening on your data disk and if files it is writing, it's going to wait until that is completed and then take the backup. And the next is an application consistent. That is the best kind of backup we can get from the Azure Backup, which is database aware. So this is the best level. Applications like SQL Server are properly prepared before backup happens. Think of database backup. You don't want database transaction corruption during backup. That's why application consistent backups matters. Often where we have database or an application running inside the machine, we would want our backups to be application consistent. Next we have is the incremental data transfer. And this is another very important concept. So the first backup of your resource is going to be the complete full backup, and then the subsequent backups will just the delta changes. And the benefit we get is this will save the storage, bandwidth, and the backup time. And next to have a backup successfully taken from our virtual machine, we would need to have the policies. So the backup policy tells Azure when to take backups and how long do we want to keep the backup. For example, you would want your resources to have the backups taken daily or retain your data for 30 days and archive older backups after 40 days, right? So you can configure all these in Azure policy. Also in Azure, we have two kind of policies, that is standard policy and we have the new enhanced policy. In the standard policy, what we get is we can take the backup only once a day, but in enhanced policies, we can take a backup every 4 hours. That is 6 snapshots we can take at a single day for a virtual machine. And the instant restore option is that before moving the data to the recovery services vault, there is an option we can have that to restore our backups quickly, we can have instant restore. That is, it is going to restore our virtual machine quickly. Recovering from the vault is going to take time because it moves the data from the vault to our location, and more the data, the more time it's going to take from the vault. So instant restore provides you the capability of restoring your virtual machine quickly. With the standard policy, we have 1 to 5 days, but with enhanced policy, we have 1 to 30 days. And also the disk support is STD, SSD, and the premium SSD. But the enhanced policy supports the next version also, that is the premium SSD V2 and the ultra disk. And the retention and tearing rules. So sometimes we would want our data for the compliance purposes to store for a longer duration. Like we would want our finance data to store for years for compliance requirements so that we can get with the Azure backup. And the next is policy automation. So Azure can even automatically apply backup policies to VMs using tags and automation. That is, we can specify a scope, that is a subscription or a resource group where our resources are, and we can specify a vault where the resources would automatically gets attached for the backup. And this is how Azure backup actually works behind the scenes. So this was all the theory, and in next video we'll configure Azure VM Backup step by step and see all these options and create all the services which we just saw and configure our Azure virtual machine backup step by step.